All right, listen, I don't have a lot of time because, well, quite frankly, they're coming for me. Now, listen, you have to get this chip, you have to get this data, you have to get it to somebody who can disseminate it to the world. Oh my God, they're here. Take the chip, go, get out of here. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of How to Be a Great Player. My name is Guy and today we're looking at the hunted idea. That's the idea of playing a character who is hunted, who is on the run from something, who has a dark and mysterious past and is desperate to get away from whatever it is that is after them. Now, why should we do a whole video on this, I hear you ask? Well, there was enough requests coming through for us to do the video in the first place, meaning that you lot want to know how to do it. And I have some thoughts on this particular matter. When I read the comment, I went, well, just play a hunted character. I mean, it's just a hunted character. What are you? And then you realise, wait a minute. There's a lot more to playing a hunted character than first meets the eye. And I kind of broke it down into three categories. There's the goal, the end game, and then making it inclusive. So if you can do those three things, that will make your hunted character feel that much better. And quite frankly, will also make your hunted character something that someone else, your other players and their characters, will actually want to help and engage with. Which if you don't do it, you could just end up finding your hunted character being handed over to the person or authorities that they are running from by your fellow player characters. So let's jump straight into it, shall we? So you need to have a goal when you create a hunted character, and I think that your goal always needs to be along the lines of the character needs to deliver a message, get away from somebody, prove their innocence. There are a number of options in terms of a hunted character's background, and you need to explore that. But more importantly, you need to explore how does it unfold. What's the character's goal? Is their goal to get away? Is their goal to terminate or exterminate their hunted individual? What is that? So we need to have a very clear goal in mind for the character. What they intend to do about it. When you're on the run, you need to be on the run somewhere. Very famously, one of the greatest hunted individuals of all time, and this was because he was hunted by quite literally everything, always used to say that it's not the destination that's important, it's the motion of running away, because it means you are actually running away rather than being eaten, caught, or otherwise involved. So the destination wasn't important. However, in our case, we definitely need to know where our character is trying to get to. Where do they think they're going to be safe? What is it that they think will bring them their salvation? It's important to bear in mind when you're creating the character, and we're going to see why a little bit later on. We also then need to define the hunter. Who is tracking and following this character? Is it a giant organization that's super powerful? Is it an individual? Is it an entity? Is it perhaps an idea? We can, when we think of a hunted character, we could play someone who's haunted and hunted by their own memory, if we want to play a really psychological kind of game. So there are many, many ways in which we could have our character being hunted down. So we have to define who that hunter is. If you look at Star Wars, for example, Darth Vader was the hunter of Luke. He was trying to find and kill all of the Jedi. Luke was a hunted character, constantly on the run. Although, and this is the important thing, it didn't really feel like that in the films. And there's a good reason for it. He was a hunted character. He had this bounty on his head, as did Han Solo, for example. Solo's, of course, came to fruition. And I think it's a much stronger hunted story. If you like, he was hunted by Jabba the Hutt, who had sent bounty hunters after Han in the first place to capture him. And of course they did. Oh, spoiler alert from the 1980s. So once Han was captured, he then had to face off against his opponent, against Jabba the Hutt. Han's original goal was basically just to try and make back the money that he owed to Jabba, and by doing so would eradicate the whole hunted process. Of course, that never transpired. So at least he had a goal going in, which means that when we first met Han Solo in the Mos Eisley Cantina, he was someone who was desperate for cash. So even though Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke Skywalker couldn't afford to pay him what he needed, they were willing to pay him more once he got to the destination. That fitted in with his story, with his goal of how to avoid being a hunted character, and as a result, we get the entire trilogy. If he'd said no because he didn't have that as a goal, or if his creator/player hadn't had that as a goal, he'd refused the lower payment, then the entire film might have shifted to how Obi-Wan and Luke Skywalker become male prostitutes to raise the money. It's not likely that that would have been how the story played out, but with role-playing, you never know with players, right? So you need to define who is hunting the character. You then need to decide and define why your character is the hunted character. Why is it not somebody else? Is your character the one who very specifically is anyone who's got the data chip? Is your character because of a specific species or a sexuality the one that are being hunted? What is the motivator? What is driving them? Did they cause the thousands of souls to die and that's why the souls are now hunting them? So whatever is hunting them, you need to define why and how it is that that particular character got involved in that in the first place. That's very important to understand and unpack. So we now understand who is following us, why we are the ones that are being followed, and what our character's goal is in terms of moving forward. All of this, by the way, should be passed through your GM at every step. The GM is going to be the one who's responsible for driving this. You can't suddenly say, oh, I look across the corridor and see Darth Vader there. The GM might be going, what? No, he's not anywhere near there. He's on the Death Star. He's busy doing something else. So the GM is going to have to work very closely with you to do this. If you go to the GM with this battle plan, it takes a lot of the pressure off the GM to try and figure out how to balance this whole thing and to see how to motivate it. The GM is now going to be free to create the adventures around which all of this is going to be revealed and transpires. So that makes the GM's game a lot more interesting for them, so they're probably going to welcome it. But you have to go in with a complete plan. When we then look at the Endgame, now this is something that you also have to think about. So Endgame is different from goal. The goal is to pay back the loan. The goal is to release the virus into the atmosphere. The goal is to escape the demon monster that's hunting you in the jungle. That's your goal. However, as the creator, as the owner of this idea, you need to have some of these in mind. How does it end? Is it going to end with a showdown? Is it going to end, as I've written here, is it going to end with the character managing to pay back the money? Again, these are things that you should know about because, and I raise this now, this is where you are a story crafter rather than a reactor to the GM's plot unfolding. If you decide that it ends with your character having to face their enemy, you've spoken to the GM and you have said, my enemy is this corporation. My character's goal is to try and avoid the corporation at all costs. I, as the player, my narrative drive is that I would like my character to actually discover that the corporation was started by their father and that they are the only ones who can biologically shut down the central computer of that corporation and bring it to its knees. So that's going to force a showdown. That's what I would like to have happen. So when you're then playing that character, the character's avoiding the corporation at all possible steps. And hopefully the GM is then adding in clues that, well, you jump into a corporation vehicle, it automatically starts up and it says, hello, welcome. Where would you like to go? Whereas every other PC who jumps in the vehicle says unidentified object. You are not authorized for this vehicle. Things like that. So there's this build that starts to happen, sending the character closer and closer to that final confrontation and that final showdown. The showdown could be this climatic, gigantic battle. It could also be something where it's reconciliation. The character suddenly realizes that what is hunting them is actually trying to help them, to make them better, to make them stronger. And only when they embrace that does that then happen. That happened with Luke and Darth Vader. He realized at the very end that he could save his father, that his father is not this evil that was trying to destroy him, even though he was, but that he could be saved. So when you've thought about those two things, again, don't feel as if you're taking agency away from the GM. You're not saying to the GM, I would like this plot to unfold at this time. Session 23, I would like you to introduce these NPCs, and this is this, and this is that. You are helping and working with the GM. There's no reason why you can't do that. So don't be afraid to go to the GM and say, well, listen, I would like this, and I would like that, and this is how I'd see it happening. And if the GM seems to have forgotten, they probably have. So you might need to refresh their memory saying, so I've been hunted for a while now and I haven't really picked up any clues. Have I missed the clues that you've been throwing out? That remember, this is what my goal was. Are we still on track for that? If your GM says, no, I'm not doing that, time to find a new GM. GMs should be willing to accommodate, especially if it doesn't break their game. And of course you have to make sure that you fit within their game. I should have put that as a giant stamp up front. It should fit within their game. You can't be a hunted Jedi in a modern day setting. I mean, that would just be weird. You also need to figure out then what. So often do we have these goals. Oh, if I can just get this book, I can do that. If I can just get this, I can do that. If I can just get rid of my enemy that's hunting me, life will be great. Well, what will that life be like? You don't have to define it in huge amounts of terms, but you do have to decide what is the character going to do after that. Once that is ended, what if the GM pops their cork too soon and suddenly you're facing against that computer AI halfway through the campaign? After that, is your character still hunted? Well, that's entirely up for you to decide. You then have to say, well, maybe they are, maybe they're not. Maybe they now become the hunter, I beg your pardon, hunting down anyone who was involved or responsible or who took part in the previous actions. So there's an interesting twist that we can bring to it, but we need to be prepared for it. And if you do so up front, it does make it a lot easier down the line. This can obviously always change depending on your character and group composition as well. So it's not set in stone. And then we need to make sure, absolutely ensure, that we are inclusive of our fellow players and their characters. There's nothing worse than having a player whose character is hunted and they derail the plot because their character's hunted, so we've got to save them. Jedi are a classic example in Star Wars games where the Jedi are being hunted. If you've got a Jedi with you, just having them in the same cantina can cause the entire plot to crumble if they're not aware of how to mask themselves, if they reveal themselves as Jedi. Now the whole planet's on alert and Darth Vader's coming in with Death Stars. You need to make sure that you include the other PCs. Confide early on in the campaign. I'm being hunted by a giant corporation because I stole their AI and it's currently sitting inside my head. I need to get it to a robotics lab that's got enough equipment, such as a quantum flux inverter, that will allow me to remove it, and then I can reveal it to the world to show how evil this corporation is. They have got pretty good reach and will be coming after me. If I can get your help, once I'm done, I have some money that I can unlock. I can't do that now because they're going to trace me, but then I can unlock some money and I can help pay you. Figure it out. Think about how you're going to include the other PCs, but you must include them. You must make sure that they're on board, and it's not that difficult to do that. It really isn't. Just talk to them. You also have to be aware of other plots. Now, this is the other important thing. I so often get players who go, oh, well, this is my character's story. Here's a plot point. Yes, but my character's story is more important than that plot point, so I'm going to stick to my character's story and ignore plot points. All you're doing is you're making the rest of the players unhappy because you're denying them a plot point the GM has clearly set up. You've made the GM unhappy because, well, the GM is helping you with your story. Why aren't you helping the GM with their story? It's reciprocity. It's about saying, well, yes, I acknowledge that you're giving me this great adventure. I'm giving you that great adventure. Let's work together. So sometimes your drive, your imperative to do something so you can get your daughter back or your sister or your brother or whatever the pressure might be, sometimes those are going to take a back seat, and sometimes they're going to sit and take some time. Don't worry about it. The GM is moving that story at the speed of plot. Unless they've purposely put on a time frame, in which case then it's within your rights to follow through. But if it's an open-ended thing, don't worry about it. Let your character explore the other plots so that you don't deny them for your fellow players and for your GM. Another thing that you can look at is making them shared. So if you go to some players beforehand, because you've thought about all of this before the game, you can say to them, well, look, I've got this sort of story bubbling around in my head. Would you like to be someone who helped me escape? Or would you like to be someone who used to be hunting me, but then you heard my story and now you joined up with me, so now you've become hunted as well? You don't have to convert the entire party to your cause, because if you're all being hunted, then that changes the GM's master story anyway. But if you have approached somebody else and you've asked to share your story with them and they've agreed, that makes it that much more interesting and that much more engaging. Hopefully your PC's got relationships with these other characters anyway, but this helps build that relationship and makes it even stronger. It also means that now there's two of you, so those plots can evolve in ways that even you can't anticipate, which makes it that much more interesting, even more so. So there's all sorts of ways of making it interesting by sharing. Sharing is caring, remember that. Care, care, care. So hunted characters can be very interesting characters to play, and they can be very interesting characters to have on the team. They create a certain element of tension and terror, and, well, quite frankly, are great at moving the story along, because there's a pace that comes with these hunted characters desperately trying to escape whatever it is that's hunting them. There's also elements of terror and horror and all those other wonderful things that come with that. Hunted characters, there's more to it than just their first appears, and hopefully this has helped you to create a more interesting hunted character that will make the most of their party and will have the party helping them to make the most of their story. Till next time, happy playing. Okay, I've actually changed my mind. Give me that chip back, okay? Yes, good, because I like it. I like it too much, actually. I like it. And I subscribe to the idea that all men and women and everything in between, all of us, we're all free. Yeah, so I'm just gonna go now, and if you see anyone, just tell them that I went that way. Yeah. Okay, bye.